power of the blue shell cannot be underestimated in Mario Kart. It's glad to be here. Thank you all for having me. It's wonderful to be part of this community. We're going to be talking today about power. And as mentioned, my name is Anil Dash. The context that's probably useful about who I am here is that I've had a lot of the roles that we've talked about today. I was an individual contributor coder for the bulk of my career, a lot of my career. But also we've talked today about roles of like when you got to step up to being a manager, when you got to step up to being a director. As David mentioned, I was a CEO, I've been on boards. I've gotten to have a lot of different roles. And so what I wanted to do was take you with me where I've gotten to be in the room with some of the most powerful investors in the industry and what I learned from being there. Because there are things that are specific to how people got power, used power, that I got to witness that I would love to share with you because we don't all get to see it and we don't all get to learn from that example because power is the thing that gives us access. And what's really, really, I think, important for this room is what I've heard about how you all want to use it and wield it. We've heard so much about empathy. We've heard so much about building psychological safety for your teams, how you want to build trust for your teams. That is the kindest use of power, but you still have to have power to make that happen, right? And also because this is something we never talk about. We will sometimes talk about money, right? Like I'd like to get a raise, that might come up, or I'd like to help my team member get a raise. But power is a word that is very seldom discussed, and yet it is something that is really vital. And it's interesting because you very seldom hear somebody say, I need power, right? It's not the thing they say out loud, but it's the subtext of why they may want to advance so that they can enable things to happen. And as I said, very rarely is it out of their own greedy need. It's not out of selfish desire. Certainly, I think for all of you as leaders, it is not out of your selfish desire. It's to enable things to happen, ambitions you have about being able to create something, about being able to empower people. So to get started with that conversation, I'm going to go into some basics of what we think about for power that are useful to understand in a work context, in a corporate context, in the context of your career. And the first and most important thing, if you hear nothing else I say today, is that everybody has power. Everybody in this room has an extraordinary amount of control and agency over your life, over your career, over the work that you do, over the world around you, over the things that are happening. And I know that can be hard to believe, especially maybe in a moment like right now, because nobody ever thinks they have power, right? You might be like skeptical, like, well, I don't know. I don't know if I do. I don't know if I go back to my office, if I can feel like I have as much power as I need to get the things done that I would like to. And it is okay to feel that way because nobody ever feels like they have enough power. Well, if I just had a little bit more, then I would feel like I were empowered. Nobody feels like they have power. So let's jump into it. The first thing to understand, if we think about power, is that systems run on power. This sounds like an obvious thing to understand, but it is not as obvious as it seems because power is invisible, right? So when you walk into a room and you've made the logical case for this is the decision we must make, this is the right choice to make, and then another choice is picked, another decision happens. Very often the reason why is because somebody else had the power to say, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do the dumb thing, right? Right? And you're like, well, why? And very seldom will they say, well, because I have the power to say, let's go the wrong way. And so it's really clear that there is something making the other choice happen. But again, people don't say out loud, well, there's a system at work here, and I am the one that has power in the system. So it's good to understand this because that invisibility of the systems makes it very difficult for us to talk about it. But if we can name it, we can start to learn about it. A second related principle here is the purpose of a system is what it does. How many of you have heard this phrase before? Now, this is the fundamental principle of an entire field of study called cybernetics. If you want to Google that that field of study is, you could spend the rest of your life studying it. I'll do a quick gloss on it here. But this is an important concept to understand, which is that if there is a system around you, it could be the place that you work, it could be the industry that you're functioning in, it could be a technical system, but it could be social systems, right? Like the legal system or the judicial system. If there is a system that is functioning, and particularly if it's functioning in a way where you do not like the output of it, you do not like the end result of what it produces, it may be useful for you to understand that does not necessarily mean that system is malfunctioning. It may mean that the people that have power in that system want something different from it than you do. The system is not broken. The purpose of that system is exactly what it is doing. This is a really key thing to understand as you start to think about power. It ain't broke. So think about when you filed a bug and you get back a won't fix, all right? And then think about all the systems of the world where you've tried to file a bug. You didn't get back a won't fix, but the person on the other side was maybe saying to you, operating as designed. Okay? So the purpose of a system is what it does. Now, maybe you need to coerce that system to want to be something other than what it is. That's power. Third thing is, and I cannot say how true this is, systems express their value through their budgets. I have been the person that approves a budget a number of times in my life, and the money is the measure. The money is the measure. Where the dollars go is what they really feel. Let me tell you, I spent many years of my life working in the field of DEI, and so I can tell you where the money is where the values are. This is also useful because that is a way to tell what the power in the system wants. Where are the bucks? Or the 75 cents, where the 75 cents stops. I love that. That was great. And so these are the things we can sort of use to tell how the machine is running. Who's got the power? Where the money flows? And now we're talking about the stuff people feel uncomfortable talking about. Let's get into it. Institutions have power. This seems obvious again, but this is something to really think about. For example, the companies we work at, those are institutions, they have power. They have the power to pay our paychecks, that's great. They have the power to give us jobs, and then we can tell our folks, look on my LinkedIn, I got a job, aren't you proud of me? That's good. They have the power to have a brand and put a product out into the market. That's nice, that's good. That makes us feel proud about our work. And so we are able to say that is something that supports us, that elevates us, that gives us a platform. And we're very clear on that. And they make that clear to us, that they have power, obviously. A newer thing is that all of us as people lend our power to the institutions. How many of you have had the experience with one of your reports where they're saying, like, I don't think this is right, I don't like this, this is frustrating me, and you had to tell them, look, can you just bear with me? Can we just accept this for a bit? I know it's frustrating. How many of you had to say that to one of your reports? Pretty much everybody. That is you lending your reputation, your trust, your power to the institution. Right? You are feeding that thing, which is a finite resource, which is of yourself, to that institution. Now, it might be worth it, right? That might be what it takes to get the job done. That's okay. But understand that is something that you are granting to the institution. And it's not just a kindness, right? It is spending something that is valuable, that is limited. And that's new, is people putting their power into the system, because that's something that's needed to fuel it. And we're all doing that all day long for all different kinds of systems. And we need to be cognizant of it, because it happens intuitively. We know, you're all smart people, you know when you need to do it to make the machine keep running. You know when it's the right thing to do for convenience sake. You know when you do it and it sucks and it feels bad, right? But it's a good thing to be able to say out loud. And again, it's important to say that because systems are hard to see. And so if we're able to name it, we're able to describe it, we can be more aware of it. Let me get into something that makes this a little bit more visible. All of us have seen an org chart, right? Especially when the reorg is coming. We know what this looks like. I'm going to go into a very simplified version of this that might make this a little bit more obvious. This is sort of a classic org chart. You got your CEO, they got their C-level reports, maybe there's some VPs and directors in there. There might be more layers to this. And then you got your managers, and then your ICs, your workers. People actually do some stuff. And maybe there's a bunch of those. How many folks have, a version of this is what your companies, your organizations look like, right? Deliberately simplified, but hopefully this looks pretty familiar. I'm going to run through kind of people's relationship to power, how they think about it in their workplace when they're in these different roles. And I'm going to start with the most obvious here, right? The individual worker. Pretty much all of us have been there. And when you think about power when you're in this role, it sucks. I don't have any power. I can't even choose what front-end framework we're using, right? I have to ask somebody if I can take the afternoon off to go to the dentist, right? I have no power, is my feeling. And those are the superficial things. Those are the easy things. Then there is also, I heard somebody tell me that somebody in the board meeting said interest rates change, so we might have layoffs. What the hell does that mean? Am I going to have a job? Right? That's what we were just talking about. And some of us have been on the other side of having to tell somebody in this role, I heard there might be layoffs. I don't know if you're affected yet. That sense of powerlessness is so profound and so overwhelming. And I think we all remember being in that place. You know, I was there in 2008. I was there in, 2020. All the different waves we've been through when something happens in the world, I don't even know how that relates to my job, and all of a sudden I might lose it. And what happens to my future? Like, this is the place where I feel I have no power at all. But then what do you say when you're in that role? If I could just move up a little bit in the org chart, then I'll have enough power to have some control of my life, right? And so then what you want to do? You want to become a manager, right? How many of us have been managers? A lot of us in the room are managers. And then you have enough power, right? Then you have control over your life. I think that's right. Yay, congrats, you're a manager. No, genuinely, I actually think it is something to be celebrated, because I think what I've seen from the conversations here is so many of you aspire to this to be able to take care of people. I love the empathetic spirit of that. How much of it is centered in a culture of care for others. And that is something to be celebrated, right? Because you want to be able to, care for the people in your life, certainly to provide for them, but also for the people on your team, that you want to be that umbrella, to be that shield, to be able to elevate them. And then what you find out is you got to that role, you worked hard, and the power that you got was not to make a decision, but to try to convince the people above you to make the right decision, right? And you're making the case to people that are far enough away from the problem that they don't know what it is, and you're trying to persuade them. But what's the answer then to that frustration? Well, if you could just move up a level, right? You can get enough power. Certainly then, you can have enough power to make a decision. So I'm going to spoil this a little bit. It just keeps going like that. And I say that with love and respect for having been in these levels. And then it goes like that. So I'll fast forward a little bit. Everybody feels that squeeze all the way up. And eventually you get to, if you're really unfortunate, the top. And I've been a CEO a couple times by either starting a company or getting hired in to be CEO. And I only say this kind of half-jokingly, how much this role sucks. Like, I'm a product person mostly, I was a lousy engineer, so I had to be a product person. And when I was a CEO, I spent like 5 minutes a week working on products. But that wasn't, that's the sort of glib part. What it looks like when things go wrong, like really wrong, and things are hard, is like the market is bad, okay, that part's hard. The competition is doing well, that part's hard. But like, I make a mistake as a CEO, so we're not doing well. Which means I have a conversation with our investors that I get to lay off, by my choice, a lot of our team. A lot of them. Including people I deeply care about. Friends of mine. And they get to tell their partners, the plans we were making are not going to happen. Maybe that's a vacation, maybe that's we were going to have kids. This is America, so they get to say, because I made that choice, they don't have health insurance. It is not moral that I have control over whether these good people have health insurance. That does not feel to me like I have power. but I have power. That's what I was working upwards towards. So that sat with me a lot. I've thought about that approximately every day since then. And part of, you go to therapy and you think through these things, and part of, I'm not joking, and you wish the other CEOs did. Because what I thought is I would talk to my peers and see how they went through this. And what I realized was it didn't bother them at all. Because one of the things you might have noticed if you look at the other CEOs in this industry, they're nuts. I thought they were like, how do you process this stuff? How do you work through this? And they're like, oh, I don't have enough power. I got to go up. And, they were just making stuff up in group chats about, like, we got to go in founder mode. And yeah, I don't know what y'all are talking about. So this is this thing that was really interesting is the individual sense of, like, I personally need more power shifted from what you all have been talking about. If I'm going to care for someone, I'm going to protect my people, into, like, what about me? And what I realized was, like, they had gone into the people next to them. They were working collectively, right? Their group chat was, well, how were they convincing themselves that they were sort of victims? Was this sort of collective gathering of power. And one of the reasons, like, I've had these conversations with some of you today and in the past about people here feeling constrained in having fewer options of, career paths in the industry, as there's not as many places to go where you can have the career path you might have wanted to have, or there's a sort of an attenuation of places that you can explore, paths that you can go, different career paths, sort of options and opportunities that used to be there. And some of this was, intentional, right? Is that people in this cohort wanted people to feel a little bit more constrained because they were intentional about power. They talk about it. They talk about it out loud to each other. And so that's one of the reasons I'm trying to advocate that we do the same. But there also is the reality that there are a lot of the levels up above. There is supposed to be accountability above them, like a board of directors. Now, this doesn't always work this way these days, to be clear. But this is the people who are supposed to say, well, we can hire and fire a CEO and hold them accountable. I had this when I was CEO. And there's all different kinds of folks there, right? There's directors, maybe like if they had a founder that got kicked up to being the chair of the board, or VCs, right? They're the investors. If you're a publicly traded company, you might have like one of those big funds that's there. Let's take the investor example, right? That's a lot of times a venture capital investor, and they might say, we're going to put pressure on the CEO because we put in all this money to this company, and we need to make back 100 times as much money as we put into the company. And we have a fund, and we're supposed to make that money back in 7 years, and it's been 6 years, and we don't see it yet. And interest rates just changed, so you better start laying people off. So they do put pressure on CEOs, and they do say, we can fire you. So maybe they're the ones that are saying there's going to be pressure. Maybe they're the ones with the power. So certainly they must feel like they have enough power, right? They couldn't possibly think. There's people above them. So the reason the investors feel like they don't have enough power is because there's people above them. See, the VCs, the investors, they don't spend their own money. They get money from other people. They spend other people's money. Those folks are called private equity people or limited partners. And limited partners are like sovereign oil, like the oil people, or they're like billionaire families that have so much money they can gamble money on venture capital. So then the investors are like, I don't have any power. I need to move up one level and get to the real tier, where the real power is, private equity. It just keeps going up. I'm going to keep going for this like an hour and a half. So we get into this layer, and I was like, I just learned about this stuff like several years ago, and I was like, this is nuts. Like, how far does it keep going? But what was really interesting about these folks was what I learned I'm going to just go deep on one of these. Let's take the private equity folks. These are people that just like pull all the money in the world and invest it into these companies. They do have the ability to put pressure on the companies that are there. But we talk about how systems are hard to see, these kinds of investors. Back when the IBM PC came out in 1981, there were 24 private equity firms in the country. Does anybody know how many there are now? There are 17,000. There are more private equity firms in America than there are McDonald's. That means they are probably less discerning about who they hire. And their supply chain has to be even more inclusive than McDonald's is with potatoes for the fries. Right? They just got to crank people through. And so what I take out of that is, remember we're talking about how sort of the money has to flow through the system. They have to put pressure on these systems. So they've got power, and they are working collectively too. They're talking to each other about how do we put pressure on everybody downstream. They're talking to each other. So if we think about, oh, these VCs are having groupthink, they're all saying the same thing, it's because they're all getting money from the same people. We're saying you got to do the same thing. We got to get the same results. So everybody one step down is feeling paranoid because they're being ganged up on by the people that they feel have power one level above them. Everybody feels powerless. Everybody feels like they're getting beat up by the people that are one level above them. So who's above them? They feel they have no power because they're being hemmed in by the regulators and the policymakers. Now, admittedly, this has mostly been taken care of recently. But I used to work with these folks, and for a long time when we lived under the rule of law, it was great. And sorry, a little editorializing. But in all seriousness, having talked to folks who have helped countries recover from authoritarianism, this is the level that you can strengthen. And when you do, civil society is able to recover, and you can hold crony capitalists accountable. And this is something that has incredible power, and there is a lot of power and potential there. But the people who are in this discipline right now, as you can imagine, do not feel particularly powerful. I think they have a good case. And they will tell you when they do this even the best of times, the people that they feel they don't have power over, that they are accountable to, are another level up. And those are a really interesting group of people. Who are they accountable to? They would say activists and researchers and journalists and academics. That's who they listen to shape their conversation about how an entire industry should work. A really interesting group. Now, one thing I will tell you, having been in that group, I used to be a writer for a long time, journalists and activists, researchers, and certainly academics will not tell you that they feel particularly well-resourced or have a lot of money, right? They will not tell you they feel particularly powerful. But they do have the ability to shape conversations, right? We do hear what they say. And certainly they have enough influence that we've seen them under attack by a lot of folks in the middle of this diagram. So there must be some power there, right? There's a reason people are pushing one level up and one level up. But what's striking to me is I spent a lot of time with that group at the top, especially in recent years. And if you ask them who they feel they should be accountable to, who should have power over them, something really interesting comes out of listening to these groups. And they're all very similar in what their desires are. That everybody keeps looking up. Everybody keeps looking up. Everybody thinks there's a higher level. So if you get all the way to the top here of that sort of civil society, really publicly oriented people, who do they think they look up to? Who's above them? Who are the people they want to be most accountable to? We have this path that keeps going up. It's like, okay, this ladder, there's got to be a top, right? And the activists say they want to be accountable to the workers. Right? There is no ladder. Everybody is accountable to the next party. Right? It's a wheel. There is this sense that it's a myth that somebody has power over you. There is always another group that will have the thing that you want. And so it just keeps going. And this was an epiphany that I had by finally getting the chance to talk to everybody in every group. And also that people form allyships across these groups in sometimes surprising ways. There are good actors in every one of these groups, which challenged a lot of my preconceptions. Like, I wanted to demonize or valorize every one of these groups in different ways. And then spending enough time with them to learn with nuance that many people in all these groups were wielding their power in good and bad ways was challenging to me, especially when I spent time with them or when I got to be in those roles. And I thought it would be different when I had that role. I'll be a good CEO, right? Maybe. So all of us have been lending our power to these systems, right? And we feel good when we're able to protect our teams. We feel good when we're able to advocate for them. And we feel good when we are able to lend power to those systems, but we don't always think about whether those systems are lending power to us. Right? Are they feeding us? Are they taking care of us? Are they taking care of our teams? How many of us have heard this phrase? Burnout doesn't come from hard work. Burnout comes from moral injury. Has anybody heard that? Maybe a couple of folks. This is a really important concept. I want you to really take this in. If you are burnt out, it is not because you have been working long hours. It is not because you are tired. All of you are hard workers. None of you are afraid to work long hours. It is because you have felt hurt at a moral level. It's because you have not felt respected, or you have not felt appreciated, or you have not felt like your values have been respected. It is because your power has been misused by the institution that you trusted with your power. This is the truth. It took me a long-ass time to learn this. I caused people to burn out. That worked for me because I hadn't learned this yet. I don't ever want to do that again. Don't do this to your people. It's easy to do by accident. And I point this out because this is the default when we don't know how power works. We burn our people out. We allow our institutions and our systems to burn people out. And then if we look at how people misuse their power when they are intentional about it, we see the group chats. That's what they're doing, right? They are working together to say, how do we use our power against the people who are not under our sufficient control? But here's the thing. If they can use their collective power in this way, so can you. You got group chats. You got friends, right? You're nice people. So there's something very simple here, which is when you think I need power, when you talk to the people who report to you and they think I need power to solve this problem, when you're going forward and you think about to each other the solution to this challenge that I have on my team, in my company, in this industry, in the greater world, is that we need more power. Remember that what you need is power together. You have power together. Because when you remember that, what you have is the ability to actually change systems. So if you remember nothing else that I say, remember one thing. You have power together. Extraordinary power. And I beseech you, believe me, I have seen it. Even in a time like now, even when things are challenging, the power that you have collectively can change extraordinary things. Please use it. Thanks.